the relentless trial of a medieval winter. Come near, dear listener, and let us traverse the frozen heart of a medieval winter, a season that was no mere backdrop to life, but a formidable adversary, its icy grip shaping every facet of existence. In this distant era, the cold was not a passing inconvenience, but a relentless force, dictating the rhythm of survival, testing the resilience of souls, and forging communities through shared hardship. This journey will take us deep into the hamlets and hovels of a time when winter was a crucible, its trials as much a part of life as the breath in one's lungs. The ominous approach of winter in a small hamlet nestled between rolling hills where frost painted delicate patterns on blades of grass. The first whispers of winter stirred long before the snow fell. Autumn's vibrant tapestry, leaves of gold, scarlet, and amber, faded into brittle decay, their colours leaching into the grey of impending cold. The villagers, attuned to the turning seasons, moved with a quiet urgency. Their breath formed fleeting clouds in the sharpening air, each exhale a marker of their labour. The harvest, their shield against the lean months ahead, was gathered with meticulous care. Every stalk of barley, every knobby turnip, every sack of oats a precious bulwark against the starvation that loomed like a specter in the shadow of winter. The sky, heavy with clouds swollen with the promise of snow, hung over the hamlet like a stern overseer, its gaze unyielding as it judged their preparations. The villagers knew winter was no gentle visitor. It descended with the savagery of a ravenous wolf, its icy claws piercing every corner of life. From the humblest peasant's hovel, patched with mud and straw, to the stone-walled manors of the nobility, where wealth offered only a fragile veil of protection, no one escaped its reach. Unlike our modern world of insulated homes, glowing radiators, and well-stocked pantries, the medieval era offered no such reprieve. The cold was a constant companion, slipping through cracks in wooden walls, frosting the edges of coarse woolen blankets, and settling into the very bones of those who endured it. Villages became isolated outposts, cut off by snowdrifts that buried paths and turned roads into treacherous quagmires. Travel was a gamble, often impossible until the distant promise of spring. Messengers, peddlers, and pilgrims vanished from the roads, leaving hamlets to fend for themselves. The silence of winter was profound, broken only by the howl of the wind or the creak of ice-laden branches. Every preparation, every log stacked, every sack of grain stored, every scrap of cloth mended, was a calculated act of defiance against a season that offered no mercy. The villagers' work began months in advance. In late summer, men and women toiled in the fields, reaping crops under a still warm sun. Children scrambled to gather fallen apples or glean stray grains, their small hands vital to the collective effort. Barns and cellars were filled with whatever could be spared: dried peas, salted fish, wheels of hard cheese, but never enough to banish the fear of scarcity. The elderly, their faces etched with the wisdom of winters past, recounted tales of lean years when hunger claimed entire families, their stories a grim reminder to leave nothing to chance. The battle for survival, the medieval year was divided into two stark realities: the season of growth, when fields bloomed and livestock thrived, and the season of endurance, when survival hung by a fragile thread. Winter was the latter, a time when every resource was stretched to its limit. The hearth was the heart of every home, its fire a flickering lifeline that demanded constant tending. Wood, gathered in warmer months through backbreaking labour, was fed to flames that offered only fleeting warmth, their glow barely reaching the dim, smoky corners of the room. The cost of that warmth was steep. Hours spent felling trees, splitting logs, and hauling them through muddy trails. A single miscalculation in the woodpile could mean a frozen night, a risk no family could afford. Families crowded together, their bodies pressed close to share heat, their breath mingling in the chill air. In the poorest homes, the boundaries between human and animal blurred. Livestock, cows, pigs, and chickens vital for milk, meat, and eggs, were often brought indoors, their snuffling presence crowding the cramped spaces. Their warmth was a necessity, their survival as critical as any human's. A cow's milk could sustain a child through the lean months. A pig's slaughter could mean a family's survival, but the loss of even one animal, through cold, disease, or hunger, could spell ruin, leaving a household with no buffer against the relentless season. Food was the cornerstone of survival, yet it was under constant siege. In the waning days of autumn, villagers had worked tirelessly to preserve their harvest. Meats were smoked over smouldering fires, their surfaces blackened to ward off decay. What little salt they could afford, often gritty and impure, was used to cure provisions, a luxury beyond the reach of many. Fruits and herbs were dried in the fading sunlight, their flavours fading with each passing week. Root vegetables, turnips, parsnips, carrots, were buried in straw-lined pits, their earthy tang a lifeline when other stores ran dry. But these methods were imperfect. By midwinter, granaries stood nearly empty, their contents rationed into meagre portions of watery gruel or hard, coarse bread that barely silenced the gnawing hunger in bellies young and old. The dreaded hunger gap, that bleak stretch from late winter to early spring, loomed over every household. With stores depleted and new crops still locked beneath frozen earth, desperation drove families to grim measures. Some ground tree bark into bitter flour, its texture gritty and its taste a mockery of sustenance. Others boiled leather shoes or belts into a tasteless broth, hoping to extract some nourishment from the tough hide. Foraging for frostbitten weeds beneath the snow became a daily ritual. Each frozen sprig a small victory against starvation. The weakest, children, the elderly, the sick, suffered most, their bodies unable to withstand the relentless depletion of energy and warmth. Water, too, became a scarce treasure. Wells froze into unyielding slabs, their surfaces mocking the villagers' crude iron tools. Melting snow over precious fires was a laborious task, each bucket a costly expenditure of wood that might otherwise warm a shivering body. The choice was brutal: burn fuel to thaw water and risk depleting reserves, or conserve the wood and endure thirst in a world already parched by cold. In some households, snow was eaten raw, its icy bite a small price to pay for hydration. But this carried risks: illness from impure snow or the slow sapping of body heat. Every decision in winter was a gamble, each choice weighed against the ever-present specter of scarcity. The physical and emotional toll. The cold was more than discomfort. It was a thief of life. Medieval homes built of timber or wattle and daub were no match for winter's assault. Gaps in walls invited the wind's biting kiss, and windows, when they existed, were covered with oiled cloth or wooden shutters that blocked both light and cold. The interiors were plunged into a dim, smoky haze, the air thick with the scent of burning wood and unwashed bodies. Floors of packed earth grew damp, chilling feet even through layers of straw scattered for insulation. Chilblains reddened and cracked skin, leaving hands and feet raw and painful. Frostbite was a graver threat, claiming fingers and toes with merciless efficiency, turning them black with no remedy but the crude slice of a knife in unsanitary conditions. The pain was excruciating, and infection often followed, a silent killer in a world without modern medicine. Respiratory illnesses thrived in the damp, crowded quarters. Pneumonia and consumption, tuberculosis, spread easily, their symptoms exacerbated by the cold and malnutrition. Infants and the elderly, winter's easiest prey, were particularly vulnerable. A child's cough could turn deadly in days, a fever spiraling beyond the reach of herbal remedies or prayers. The elderly, their bodies worn by years of labour, often slipped away quietly, their passing marked by shallow graves dug in half-frozen ground. The community mourned, but survival demanded pragmatism. Grief was a luxury when every hand was needed to keep the fires burning. The isolation of winter was its own torment. Snowdrifts buried roads, and frozen rivers halted trade and tidings. A village might stand alone for months, its people reliant solely on their own dwindling resources and ingenuity. A broken bone, a fever, or a complicated birth became a death sentence when no healer could be reached. News from neighbouring villages, marriages, births, deaths, arrived only in spring, if at all. This solitude bred a stoic acceptance. Winter would claim its due, and all one could do was pray to be among the spared. Yet it also fostered a fierce self-reliance, as families learned to mend their own tools, doctor their own ailments, and bury their own dead. The psychological weight was as heavy as the physical. Endless grey days and long dark nights eroded the spirit, fostering a melancholy that settled like frost over the heart. Tempers flared in cramped, hungry homes, where the constant proximity of family members grated on frayed nerves. Despair crept into the silences, its presence as palpable as the cold. The church offered flickers of hope, Christmas with its promise of Christ's light, and Candlemas with its candles symbolizing the return of warmth, brought feasts and prayers that lifted spirits. Yet for many, winter felt like a divine trial, a test of faith as much as of fortitude. Sermons spoke of endurance as a path to salvation, but the weight of hunger and cold made such promises feel distant. The flicker of humanity, yet amid this crucible of hardship, the human spirit flickered with defiance. The long nights birthed stories, tales of heroes who vanquished frost giants, of saints who warmed frozen hearts, of spring's inevitable return. Around dying fires, families wove narratives that bound them together, their voices a shield against despair. Elders recounted legends of winters past, their tales a blend of caution and hope, teaching the young to respect the season's power while clinging to the promise of renewal. Children, with their boundless resilience, crafted games from sticks and rags, their laughter a fleeting rebellion against the gloom. A snowball fight in the village square, a carved wooden doll passed between siblings. These small acts of joy were lifelines, proof that the human spirit could endure even the darkest days. Women, the unsung architects of survival, were the backbone of the household. They stretched every scrap of food, coaxing meals from dwindling stores with a skill born of necessity. A single onion, a handful of dried peas, a crust of stale bread. These were transformed into soups that warmed both body and soul. They mended tattered garments with care, stitching patches over patches until cloaks were more thread than cloth. They tended the sick with remedies passed down through generations, herbs like feverfew and chamomile, steeped in precious hot water, or poultices of mustard and lard applied to aching chests. Their prayers, whispered over sleeping children or dying elders, were as much a medicine as any herb, a plea for strength in a season that offered little mercy. Community became a lifeline. Neighbours shared hearths and sparse meals, pooling warmth and companionship in the face of scarcity. Winter visiting saw families gather in the warmest home, trading tales and songs to lift weary spirits. A widow might share her last loaf with a neighbour, knowing the favor would be returned when her own stores ran dry. A carpenter might mend a neighbor's broken stool, his skill a currency more valuable than coin. These moments of connection, fragile yet fierce, forged bonds that endured beyond the thaw. The village was more than a collection of homes. It was a living entity, its strength drawn from the collective will to survive. The dawn of spring. When the first signs of spring emerged, a patch of bare earth, a trickle of melted snow, a bud on a barren branch, the hamlet stirred with cautious joy. These were not mere changes but miracles, proof of survival against a relentless foe. The air softened, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and new growth. Birds, absent for months, returned with tentative songs, their notes a promise of warmer days. The villagers, gaunt but unbowed, emerged from their homes, their faces turned to the sun like pilgrims greeting a holy relic. Spring cleaning swept away the gloom. Homes were aired out, their smoky interiors cleansed by breezes that carried the chill of winter's last breath. Straw was swept from floors, replaced with fresh rushes that smelled of green fields. The fields beckoned, demanding ploughs and seeds, and the survivors answered with a vigor born of hope renewed. Men and women, their hands calloused from months of wielding axes and needles, turned to the soil, planting the seeds that would sustain them through another year. Children ran through the fields, their energy a contrast to the stillness of winter, their laughter a celebration of life reclaimed. The medieval winter was a forge that tempered human resolve. It taught lessons of preparation. Every log stacked, every grain stored, every stitch sewn was a bulwark against the cold. It taught endurance as families faced hunger, illness, and isolation with a stoicism born of necessity. And it taught the power of shared humanity. As neighbors became kin, their survival intertwined in the face of a common foe. The legacy of winter was not merely survival, but transformation. A reminder that even in the darkest seasons, the human spirit endures, waiting for the inevitable dawn of spring.